it may be that people with either different neurotypes or just different contextual and experiential backgrounds are speaking kind of different social dialects. So in the last video, we explored what the double empathy problem is, why that matters and why it's been so significant, especially when it comes to autism research. Just a quick note, this is technically the second video on the double empathy problem, so if you would prefer a more gradual introduction to the double empathy problem rather than kind of starting in the middle of a conversation, I thoroughly recommend going and watching the previous video. So let's have a little look at why this became so influential in autism research. Traditionally and historically, a lot of research around autism has focused on how autistic people don't meet neurotypical expectations when it comes to socialising or communicating. Researchers might have typically noticed things like reduced eye contact or a specific tone or type of communication and interpreted that as some kind of impaired social or communicative ability. And this is where the double empathy problem invites us to use instead a different framework. Rather than the question of why do autistic people communicate like that and why do they do it differently, it asks a more general question. What happens when two different social interaction systems interact? So basically, when two groups of people are interacting differently, what's the impact of that? Once you begin to look at it like that, not only does it become that bit more complex and interesting, it also becomes a lot more humanising. As we discussed in our last video, that research showed that often autistic to autistic interactions and conversations had a really strong foundation of mutual understanding. Conversations may be highly focused, based around interests, or generally just flow really well. And the misunderstandings and the miscommunications occurred in those cross-neurotype conversations. So it may be that people with either different neurotypes or just different contextual and experiential backgrounds are speaking kind of different social dialects. And like we know, there's no dialect that is more right than any other. But if one person assumes that their dialect is the default or is the norm, they expect that everybody else will be adhering to that, and that's where miscommunications and misunderstandings happen. For me, as somebody that grew up in the south of England but now lives in the north, I'm never really sure if dinner is lunch or tea, and don't get me started on bread cakes, tea cakes, whatever. There's a lot of misunderstandings that can happen, right? And for us autistic people, these show up in lots and lots of everyday situations. And we, because we are not the default, often carry the effort of translating ourselves to make ourselves understood. Direct communication is often interpreted as bluntness. A literal interpretation might come across as rigidness or inflexibility. Deep interest or those moments of focus can be misread as obsession. And at the same time, autistic people, myself included, might struggle to understand conversations that rely heavily on implied meaning or social convention, subtle hints, or really rapidly shifting conversational cues. For myself, it's not that I don't know that they exist, I know they do, but I also can't understand why anybody would adhere to those rather than just communicating directly. But hey, this is the double empathy gap, right? Both sides are interpreting somebody else's communication through their own framework. And for decades, so many interventions around autism focus on trying to make autistic people pass as neurotypical and kind of coaching them through eye contact or social cues. But we know that miscommunication and communication in general is a mutual shared thing that no one party is responsible for. So if there's a breakdown, as we've said, that's a mutual breakdown in understanding, which means, crucially, that no single person or no party is solely responsible for it. It is equally as important for non-autistic people to learn about autistic communication and for autistic people to learn about non-autistic communication and for us to all learn how we can communicate with each other better. If both sides are adjusting rather than just expecting one person to continue to translate themselves, everything gets better. It's that shift from fixing individuals to trying to build that mutual cohesive understanding that underpins the neurodiversity paradigm. Like we mentioned, the double empathy problem is relevant far beyond just autistic or even autistic to non-autistic communication. I think it comes up in so many different conversations that we had. But it is particularly relevant and significant for autistic people because it's set to reframe and correct one of the oldest myths and misinformations around autism, that somehow autistic people had some kind of deficit or lack of empathy, which we know to be completely false. But just knowing that it's false doesn't mean that so many conversations don't still live in the shadow of this misinformation. So I think it's really important to understand where this came from and why it held so much weight. So hang around because that's what we're looking at in our next video. I'll see you then.